So I'm at an anime con one day where I'm talking about, well, anime, finding out the new trendy anime I gotta watch, and any new cool games to play. But then something unexpected happened. I overheard a group of people not talking about anime or games, but that music from Korea called K-pop. And they were having such intellectual conversations. And by intellectual, I heard a lot of who's your bias, who's your favorite group, and which concerts will you hit up in the future. But wait, what's K-pop doing at an anime convention? It sounds weird at first, but you know, the trend these past few years, if you haven't paid attention going to anime cons, is that K-pop is not only a staple at these cons, but it's quite popular. Because the not so hidden secret these days is one of the best ways to meet K-pop fans is at anime conventions. With the new meta being this anime K-pop crossover, I think this is a trend that's subconsciously known to many fans, but they don't really talk about it too much in public. You just know that at anime conventions, you're gonna see some K-pop. So I wanted to learn more about this meta, the anime K-pop crossover. So to research this phenomenon, I traveled to the mean streets of San Jose, California to visit two anime conventions. Fanime, which happens every May of the year, and Crunchyroll Expo, which happens every August of each year. Both are in the same building, the San Jose Convention Center, and both are two of the larger anime conventions in not only California, but in the US. So we'd be going to some sizable anime conventions for this research. And because the two cons were kind of spaced out, this research took about 3 months to do. And after attending these cons, I can say this: K-pop is not a blip anymore at these anime conventions. It is a huge thing. But it's not just these two anime conventions that are big in K-pop, because anime conventions all over the US are adopting K-pop, as well as in the world. So from all the K-pop content and fans that I saw at these anime conventions, it's safe to say that yes, K-pop is the new meta at anime cons. Since I recorded so much content over a 3-month research span on this crossover, I had to split this into 2 videos. This video will talk about more of the overall picture of the anime K-pop crossover, where I break down all of its trends and factors, whereas the second video will solely be about interviews, where K-pop fans, creators, and people that work within music production will tell us about their takes on why K-pop is big at these anime cons. So with that being said, let's dive into why K-pop is becoming more prevalent within the anime scene today. To see K-pop at anime conventions is becoming the new norm, as there's quite a bit of K-pop fans in attendance. It's quite common to see con-goers dressed up in BTS or Twice gear. There were DJ events on the main stage where K-pop was blasted to all the passing con-goers. A good number of events and panels were about K-pop, including 2 panels from yours truly, which I'll get into a bit later. The dance crews here in the Bay Area came to Fanime to perform some slick choreography. Within the anime con itself, BTS merch can be found at the Exhibitors Hall and Artist Alley. One of the things that I learned going to anime conventions is K-pop is big here, as many cosplayers are into K-pop. Those cosplayers dressed up as characters from big anime hits such as Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia, and Jujutsu Kaisen become excited at the very mention of K-pop. But K-pop didn't just magically appear and become dominant at these anime conventions. The build-up to this anime K-pop meta has been around in the West for nearly 2 decades, as one of the earliest exposures of anime fans hearing K-pop singers came from anime OSTs, where K-pop artists would sing intro or outro songs of anime series. This trend started in the 2000s, where K-pop was still growing within Korea, and many Korean singers went to Japan both for work and to expand their career. And one of the most influential K-pop stars at the time was BoA, who lived in Japan during this time and was fluent in both Korean and Japanese. She would sing iconic anime OSTs such as Inuyasha's 4th ending, Every Heart. BoA was a bridge between anime and K-pop. She became an entry point to newcomers learning about K-pop artists through anime, as well as discovering BoA herself. Ever since, K-pop artists started singing anime intros or outros for anime OSTs well into the late 2000s and continues today. Anime fans would go from listening to anime OSTs by K-pop singers to straight up listening to K-pop, leading to the full J-pop to K-pop transition, which began in the late 2000s. Around 2009, K-pop began to experience an explosion in popularity in Asia, as that year was was a golden one for iconic groups and songs. At the same time, J-pop and J-rock began to decline in world popularity, retreating inward back to Japan. K-pop MVs were becoming much easier to find on YouTube and had more English subtitles, while J-pop and J-rock MVs would be very difficult to find on YouTube. This sudden shift in popularity between the two music genres would soon be shown at anime conventions. With these days, the only Japanese music most congoers know are anime OSTs. If a Japanese song did not come from an anime, chances are that many anime goers would not have heard of that Japanese song before, as these fans would not be exposed to newer J-pop and J-rock songs. As the 2010s went on, the gap between Korean and Japanese music would widen. The third generation of K-pop groups began catching on in the US and much of the West, while Japanese music was still difficult for international fans to find online. By 2017, when BTS burst into the US market, the anime community fully embraced K-pop and began adopting the music in conventions throughout the West. Artists are also noticing the new meta as well, as they're taking their artistic talents and drawing K-pop artists, most notably BTS. Take Cherry, who's an artist that's an ARMY and draws BTS art. She also noticed K-pop taking off in the anime community. Let's take a look at Cherry's take on this anime K-pop crossover. Why is K-pop so big here in anime conventions?
I can only speculate as well, but in my experience, I think that especially anime conventions, I think there is a good amount of overlap in terms of people who just enjoy not just like Eastern animation, but just like non-Western music, so you know, K-pop, J-pop, J-rock, things like that. When you look at anime conventions as opposed to like a comic convention, the comic conventions of course are definitely much more, of course they're Western heavily focused. The anime convention community is definitely more open towards other media as well.
As Cherry's interview has shown, the prevalence of Korean music at anime cons today is big. Yet this brings up the question, does K-pop belong at anime cons? For the longest time, anime cons have been about the promotion of Japanese pop culture, and with good reason. Anime is from Japan after all. Japanese music would naturally provide the music at these cons. But with the sudden explosion of K-pop in the US, the music scene at anime cons soon shifted. The evolution of the J-pop, J-rock fan to K-pop fan in the West showed that most anime congoers today prefer K-pop as their jam. And this shift from Japanese to Korean music happened quite fast, with this fan transformation to K-pop happening in just 5 to 7 years. I do think Cherry is right in the overlap of J-pop and J-rock fans becoming K-pop fans. While BTS is by far drawn the most, with the occasional Blackpink and Twice thrown in there, I do think there's a lot of room to expand in K-pop art and draw other popular artists, such as ATEEZ, Monsta X, Luna, and Dreamcatcher, to name a few. To answer the question of, does K-pop belong at anime cons? Many anime conventions had different answers, with some anime conventions that adhere to a Japanese-only con, with the biggest example of a Japanese-only con being AX, or Anime Expo, which promotes Japan and Japanese pop culture only. With this convention, at the time of this video, being bounded by their charter by their parent company, Society for the Promotion of Japanese Animation. Yet for many other Western anime conventions, they fully embraced the K-pop invasion. Anime Matsuri, one of the largest cons in the US and Texas, invited Dreamcatcher to their 2022 convention. Otakon, another con that's among the largest of US conventions, based in Washington, D.C., invited Pixie, Rolling Quartz, and soloist Alexa to their 2022 event. Talking to fans at various cons, nearly all of them seem to have no problem with K-pop being a major part of the anime community, with just a few con-goers wishing that it maintained that Japanese-only pop culture setting, showing that to a majority of anime con-goers, their answer is a resounding yes when it comes to K-pop belonging at anime cons, which is a huge reason why anime K-pop fans are the new meta, as anime cons have adopted the latest pop culture trends, with K-pop being quite big within the 18 to 30-year-old demographic in the US, with a lot of these anime fans that can seamlessly watch an anime, then jam into K-pop right after. Many con-goers will sing along to K-pop when they hear their favorite songs. Many fans plan their K-pop schedules with friends and even strangers. I've overheard numerous conversations along the lines of, which K-pop concerts will you attend this year? And I've had more than my fair share of cosplayers talk about BTS, Twice, Blackpink, and other groups at cons. At Fanime 2022, I also did 2 panels on K-pop, wanting to see just how many con-goers were interested in this topic, with one being an intellectual panel on the K-pop explosion in the US in the last 10 years, where it talks about how big K-pop is today in America, and the other one being K-pop Jeopardy, where it was a trivia game where players test their Korean pop culture knowledge. While I've been doing these panels at cons for quite some time now, I was amazed just how many fans would attend my panels, with about 150 people attending my intellectual panel on the K-pop explosion, and about 220 people attending my K-pop Jeopardy game panel, nearly packing the room. These attendance numbers show that there's a lot of demand for K-pop content at these cons, and I do think that paneling plays a big part in this K-pop demand. As for a more in-depth look at paneling at these cons, I'll have to do a separate video. It's one of the most fun experiences I've had working in K-pop, and I do think it's quite interesting to see what American K-pop fans know about K-pop, what's the most popular trends here in the US, and if intellectual K-pop content has a future among US fans. Moving away from panels, one of the biggest draws to anime conventions these days are the K-pop dance competitions, with one of the most popular events hosted by ANX K-pop Battles, a series of K-pop competitions held in anime cons throughout the US. These competitions pretty much always fill up with competitors, and with a slew of people attending the event. These fans chant the song lyrics and know the choreography, and root for their favorite dance team to win. In some ways, the dance competition felt like a mini K-pop concert. K-pop dance competitions are now a staple at many of these cons, and show no signs of slowing down. K-pop labels are also attaching themselves to anime because the anime fandom out west is huge. In fact, as big as K-pop is around the world these days, it doesn't compare to anime's reach. At least, not yet. Just take a look at this Google Trends, where we compare anime to K-pop in the US, where we compare the website traffic of anime to K-pop. And then if we look at the YouTube search traffic of the two, they're very much in favor of anime in the US, with only BTS matching up quite favorably to anime in the YouTube search. This difference gets even bigger when switched to worldwide, where anime, once again, dominates K-pop in YouTube search. These stats are just some of the indicators that K-pop is, yes, popular in the US, but at the same time, still a niche. The fact that there's over 100 anime conventions each year in North America, and only 2 major K-pop conventions, KCON LA and KCON either in New York or Chicago in 2022, show the vast popularity of anime in America. Now, some may argue that yes, the US only has 2 major K-pop events and they're both KCON, but there's a lot of US concerts each year to offset that lack of K-pop cons. And while that is true, unless it's a huge male group or the biggest female groups like Twice or Blackpink, which can all sell out a stadium in America, nearly all other K-pop concerts in the US don't even break over 1,000 people in attendance. But with anime cons, you're pulling from a much bigger audience, such as AX's massive audience of 120K, or even the cons below AX, ranging from 20K to 40K in attendance. Even if a fraction of those anime con-goers attend the K-pop concerts at night, they'll be pulling in a ton of people easily in the thousands. More K-pop companies are crunching this anime math and are realizing this huge potential. Smart K-pop labels know that to grow K-pop, they have to go where there's a large fandom of K-pop lovers, and anime conventions provide that huge audience to these labels. And the demand for K-pop has already been tested, as Dreamcatcher, Rolling Quartz, Pixie, and Alexa have already attended anime cons in 2022. And if we go back a bit, A-Pink attended Anime Matsuri back in 2019, and if we go way back, we have VIX attending Otakon back in 2012. Many of these invited K-pop singers are also avid anime fans themselves, such as the rock group Rolling Quartz, with them fully embracing the anime con scene and cosplaying at Otakon 2022, and professing their desire to do anime OSTs in the future, with Jaeyoung wanting to sing OSTs for Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan, to name 2 of them, while Hyunjung would go with Pokemon, Crayon Shin-chan, and Detective Conan. For K-pop labels, there's a lot of perks for their groups to attend anime conventions. These cons give them exposure to a bigger audience than doing a concert, with many hardcore K-pop fans that do go to these anime events. Yet the most important fans are the more casual and newcomers to the genre. These are the majority of fans that go to anime cons, where they really don't pay attention to the K-pop scene and just like the music and dances. These are the people that mostly interact with K-pop on Spotify or random YouTube MVs. And this fandom is where most of the money can be made. K-pop labels can pull from these casual fans, hoping that they can make them full-time fans of Korean music. There's a huge void in anime cons of not having concerts. Now, this would be logical that Japanese artists and groups would fill this void. Outside of these very few J-pop and J-rock acts, they're not really invited to perform at cons, with Crunchyroll Expo being one of the few exceptions to host Japanese groups. This missed opportunity by both J-pop and J-rock labels to conquer anime cons in the US is huge, as these cons should have been home territory for anything Japanese music related. Instead, this big gap allows K-pop to fill in that concert need, and to allow K-pop to enter a market that should be dominated by Japanese music acts. Other perks of K-pop labels going to cons include a big one: not having to rent a concert venue, one of the biggest costs of hosting a concert, with smaller concert venues ranging from $500 to $1,000 a day, mid-sized venues going for about $5,000 a day, and the larger ones, think amphitheater, shooting for over $10K a day on average. And as for full stadiums, they can cost well over $1 million a day. But instead of paying for an expensive venue, these K-pop groups can perform at anime conventions and piggyback off that anime convention's branding to draw in big crowds. Anime conventions are also seen as another opportunity to perform while on tour. For instance, take Dreamcatcher's 2022 World Tour, Apocalypse Save Us, in the US. Their last concert of the tour ended on July 17th in LA, getting an 11-day break before going to Anime Matsuri on July 28th. Since they're there in the US anyway, K-pop labels are thinking, might as well get another performance in before flying back to Korea. With all this talk of K-pop rolling into anime cons, a big question is, could J-pop and J-rock labels have stopped the K-pop invasion into the anime scene? Yes, it's possible, but it had to happen much earlier during the 2000s, when Japanese acts were still the dominant Asian music, and had iconic acts such as Utada Hikaru, Hamasaki Ayumi, Mr. Children, Asian Kung Fu Generation, Miyavi, Gak, and others during that decade. Japanese music needed to solidify their lead at anime cons before K-pop exploded in 2009, because by the time the 2010s rolled around, it was too late. But despite this, some Japanese labels did try during the 2010s. These labels knew that anime cons overseas should be J-pop and J-rock's territory, and thus marketed them at anime cons overseas. As noted by one of the excellent comments by the community, heavy metal group Baby Metal were pushed into the anime scene back in 2012 and 2013 in Indonesia and Singapore. By 2015, however, their company, Amuse, pulled Baby Metal from anime cons to focus on heavy metal and rock festivals instead. Idols such as AKB48 and Love Live attended AX in 2018, R&B and pop singer Crystal K, Trio and Flow, and DJ Masayoshi Iimori also attended AX 2018 as part of a concert called AutoQuest Live. R&B and pop singer Mire Toyama would attend Anime Matsuri and SAC Anime in the US that same year. Japanese-American singer Nano would attend Fanime in 2018 and Anime NYC in 2021, and as mentioned earlier, Crunchyroll Expo 2022 had a slew of Japanese acts such as Atarashi Gakko, Sim, Shihori, and Burnout Syndrome. Yet despite some Japanese acts coming over to anime cons, it was a bit too late. There were not enough acts coming overseas, and K-pop already had its stranglehold overseas among the millennials and Gen Zers that go to anime cons, giving way to K-pop having a huge opportunity to fill that anime space. As for K-pop labels that see the massive potential to perform at anime conventions, I think we'll be seeing more K-pop acts there if anime cons can get past two main obstacles. One, if anime conventions are willing to expand past a Japanese pop culture focus, and number two, being money and attendance size, as the biggest cons with the most money and attendance can actually afford to pay for a K-pop group, as well as their management team and appearance fees, which, as you can imagine, can add up quite fast. So with all these staggering costs, K-pop labels will look to the biggest conventions to perform at, which eliminates any mid-size or small conventions immediately, as they won't be able to provide that brand power nor funding that a well-known established con can. But despite these obstacles, I'm gonna say that K-pop has a very promising future at anime cons and beyond. Because just a decade ago, just having K-pop acts at anime cons was a rarity. But these days, with more and more K-pop acts headed to anime cons, it's just a great time to be alive as both an anime fan as well as a K-pop fan. But now, with more K-pop labels interested in going to anime conventions performing, this is a great sign that K-pop is growing within the West. And I do think that anime conventions see the demand for more K-pop content at their events. K-pop at anime conventions sounded kind of weird, but now that we looked at the history of K-pop at anime conventions and why it's popular there, I don't think it's weird at all. I honestly think it's a great fit. The anime K-pop meta is here to stay, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.